So what I guess I must ask first is for a little bit of a sense of what that training was like. Cause to me, it's the coolest thing ever, but I'm not one of these guys, I have to admit, that like follows, all that closely, like what SEAL training is like.
Yeah.
My brain was in other realms growing up. I was more into like music and stuff. So I kind of missed all that. Um, but yeah, I mean, like, what's it like? So you guys are like kind of the toughest of the tough. Is that kind of, that's like at least mythologically what I believe to be true. But is that actually true?
Well, there are some tough people out there, and I would say SEAL training certainly selects and assesses for those who are physically and mentally tough when it comes to that type of training. You have to, because again, what you're trying to do is not figure out whether or not someone um, has the know-how to do the job. It's more if someone can do the job, because the job in any military job, but certainly special operations, is wrought with uncertainty, challenge, problem solving. You're going to find yourself in situations that you probably have not anticipated or have tried to anticipate, but things go the wrong way. And so the question becomes: do you have what it takes to get through it? Because in combat, when the bullets start flying, or anything uncertain starts to happen, you need to be able to think through it. And I think that this, all military training, but certainly the SEAL training, was designed on that premise. And so, and really the kind of the impetus of the book, which I know we'll talk about more. What I loved about BUD, so basic underwater demolition SEAL training, is BUDS for short. That's what if someone wants to be a SEAL, they go through that course. They have to join the Navy first, of course.
And they go through buds.
BUDS, which is a 6 month course, and it's down in San Diego, and 3 phases. And Hell Week is one of the infamous,
Hmm.
weeks where you go a week without sleeping for, you only sleep for about 3 hours, and you're constantly, doing heinous physical activity, running around with boats on your heads, log PT, getting frozen in the surf zone, things like that. And that's when you get your most attrition, right? So typical attrition rates are somewhere around 85 to 90%. So you'll start with a class. In my BUDS class back in mid 90s, we started with 165 or so, graduated 38, and that's normal numbers. Um, but I think for me, so certainly very tough. For me, what I loved about the training was the purity of it. Because of the way it's designed, it doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter what your background is, doesn't matter if you were an all-star athlete, an alma mater, if you were from, New York, Kansas, or whatever, that course is going to take you down to zero and
Hmm.
see if you have what it takes to get through. And I think there are so few environments or processes in this world that one can go through that are that pure. That when you get there, it's all on you. And I think that was, and to this day remains, um, one of the things I like about that the most, is the purity of it, because you're left with this small group of guys who you trust can pretty much make it through anything. So you develop a lot of trust in each other, trust in yourself. You learn things about yourself, and subsequently that comes in handy, especially when you have a war to fight.
Oh my God. It's like a fraternity.
Yeah,
But like the probably, I mean, you literally do go through hell. You go through Hell Week.
right.
It's insane. And where were you stationed?
So I started, so trainings in San Diego. My first duty station was in Hawaii,
Hmm.
and I was working with our kind of mini submarines called the SDVs, and then from there went to the East Coast, to Virginia Beach, where the East Coast SEALs are, and it was there basically almost pretty much my whole career. So, and I'm an East Coaster anyway. I grew up in New England, so East Coast was kind of home for me. So,
Wow. And is it true that there are only about like 2,500 like on duty, active duty SEALs at any given time?
yeah, I'd have to look at the numbers. The war caused us to have to beef up the numbers a little bit.
Hmm.
So I would guess that there's somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 active duty at any one time. So it was what I guess. But naval special warfare is SEALs, it's special warfare combatant crewmen, which are boat guys. I mean, it's also just a mushroom of support, whether it be combat support, intelligence, logistics. I mean, so the special operators, the SEALs, whether you're SEAL, Green Beret, or whatever, get a lot of the cool guy credit. But none of us could ever do what we did without the support of everyone around us, our intel folks, our support folks, our supply folks, our logistics folks. I mean, it is truly a team, a community. And so Naval Special Warfare as an organization is fairly large. because it takes a lot of support to do that type of job.
I'm sure that makes a lot of sense. So you have this new book coming out, The Attributes, which I'm super excited for. I think it's actually a brilliant book. I've skimmed it already, and I'm excited to do a deep dive. How did you come to write this book? Like, when did you decide to pivot your career and focus full time on public speaking and writing?
Well, that's a great question. The pivot didn't come till I was retired. That's when I began to start thinking, "Right, what do I want to do?" So I'd always been interested in writing. The idea for the book came well before I retired. It was about midway through my career, and I was in charge of training, assessment, and selection for one of our more specialized SEAL commands. And in this particular command, what would happen was we'd actually take very experienced SEALs. They'd apply to come to our command, and then we would run them through our own selection course, about 9 month selection course, to see if they had what it took to be at that specific command. And what we had was typical still about a 50% attrition rate. And so we were in a position when I took over where we weren't able to effectively explain why guys were making it and why guys weren't making it, because again, we were talking about guys who had stellar um, records and achievements and performance. They were coming very highly recommended, and they were getting to our program. Some of them weren't making it through. And to say something like, "Well, you didn't have what it took. You didn't cut it," was really not. It was a very demoralizing thing to tell someone, to that person and to us, because it didn't describe to us effectively what was going on. If we don't can't describe what we're doing, it's not helpful for us either. So I was tasked with, by my commanding officer at the time, can you look at what we're doing and better articulate it? And so that's really when I began to look back at our roots. And this is when we kind of went back to regular SEAL training. I mean, the SEALs were formed back in the 40s with World War II, and they were formed as the underwater demolition teams. When they were planning, when they knew they had to invade Europe with a massive amphibious invasion, they recognized, based on lessons from World War One, that they needed to get men who could swim ashore and reconnoiter and look for obstacles so the ships could come in, the landing craft could come in. And so they said, we need guys who can swim in, plant explosives on these obstacles, clear paths so these Marines can land. So Draper Kaufman was tasked with creating this unit, and he had previously created an explosives ordnance disposal school. And so he had in his, I guess, Rolodex of contacts and connections, a whole host of guys who had the appropriate skills to do the job. They could swim. They could all swim. They could all put explosives on obstacles. They could all sneak across beaches and things like that. What he recognized, though, is that in that environment, he needed men who could do the job. So how to do the job and could do the job are two different things, right? How to implied skills. I have the
Mhm.
skills to do it. Can you do it when things are really rough? So in what I kind of nicknamed unconscious genius, he said, I'm going to start the whole training program with a week of just intense training where I only let the candidates sleep for maybe an hour or two. We put them through physical tests, some mental tests, but basically take them to exhaustion and beyond. And he said, I'm not going to evaluate anybody. I'm not going to run any tests. I'm not going to grade anybody. The only thing that will um, qualify someone to stay or leave is their own decision. So is someone going to quit or someone to stay? Well, most guys quit. About 90% quit.
Hmm.
But he knew that at that point he had the 10% that would be able to effectively operate. So that week, well, later morphed into what is known as Hell Week today. Bud says Hell Week is the fifth week, not the first. But ultimately, what he was looking for is not the skills, but the attributes. The
Hmm.
attributes are things like, so. Just to level the playing field, what I really was able to, with my team, deconstruct is that skills and attributes are different. Skills are not inherent to our nature. So we're not born with the ability to ride a bike, throw a ball, or shoot a gun in the military case, right? We have to learn those things. We have to be taught them. You can sit down and learn a skill, right? You can actually learn something on the periphery. If you and I sit down at a computer for 6 months for a job, we're going to learn how to type, right? That's a skill. They dictate our behavior, right? So they tell us what to do in certain situations. So here's how to drive a bike or drive a car. Here's how to ride a bike, so on. And then because they dictate behavior, they're very easy to assess, measure, and test. You can see how well someone does those things, which is why that most hiring processes, selection processes, get seduced by skills first, right? Best sales guy, best HR rep, best graphics designer. Those are all skills, top grades, right? What skills don't tell us is how people are going to operate in uncertainty and challenge, because in uncertainty and challenge, the skills that dictate behavior don't apply. You can't necessarily apply a skill to an unknown situation. This is where attributes come in. Attributes are inherent to our nature.
Mm.
We're actually born with levels of perseverance, adaptability, resilience, situational awareness, right? You can see actually those you can see those things in small children. And so certainly they develop over time, but you can see them as young as small children. They inform our behavior rather than dictate it, right? So your and my level of perseverance, adaptability, and resilience, for example, will inform the way we learn how to ride a bike when we fall off that bike 10 times or so, right? But because they're hidden, they're very difficult to assess, measure, and test. When you see them the most viscerally is during times of challenge, stress, and uncertainty, because that's when they come to the fore. I can't apply a known skill, so my attributes, right? So I'm going to lean on my patience adaptability. So a great example for all of us is 2020,
Yeah.
right? I mean, COVID especially threw us almost overnight into this deep level, deep environment of uncertainty. Very few of us had the skills with which we could apply right away. We all had to basically say, okay, what the hell is going on and how am I going to deal with it? We were leaning on things like attributes, adaptability, resilience, all this stuff, all the things I talk about in the book. And so that type of situation began to bring those to the fore. This is exactly why I was able to kind of study these so easily in SEAL training, running what I was, because the SEAL training by its very nature is to put people in stress, challenge, and uncertainty. We're looking for attributes. So I began to do this when I was running this training. It stuck in my mind. And then 10 years, 10 plus years later, when I retired, I began to do public speaking around leadership and things like that. I'd always been really interested in human performance, though. Why do people and how do people behave the way they behave? And really, quite honestly, how do people just excel and succeed? I grew up in Connecticut. I was an average kid. I was an average student. I was an average athlete. I mean, I didn't have any real trauma or real distinctive stories that could add to my narrative as, oh, this is why he became a Navy SEAL. There's nothing like that. I was just a normal kid. Yet, and then when I went through SEAL training, I made it through and I found myself staring at people who, man, I'm surrounded by superheroes here.
Mm.
How did I get here? Right. What was interesting to me is most of the guys thought that way. They'd look around and was like, I'm surrounded by superheroes, but we all felt distinguished. We all felt pretty average. Like there's nothing special about us, is how we all felt. Most SEALs will say that. There's nothing really special. We just figured out a way to capitalize on our strengths. And
Mm.
so this is when I began to really think about attributes. When I got out of the military and I was interested in human performance, I started talking about high performing teams. I kept on getting asked, hey, Rich, we just put together this dream team. Put together, got the top sales guy, the top graphics designer, top whatever, right? They were awesome until things went sideways and the team just went toxic. They fell apart. And they said, why does that happen? I said, because you were looking at the wrong things. You were putting together your team based on skills when you really needed to put your team together based on attributes, because attributes will tell us how we perform, um, both in normal times in a hidden way, but certainly when things go south. And so what I did was for the book, I basically took the attributes that I had explored in the SEAL teams, tried to ubiquitize them, right? Because some of them don't apply in normal life like they do in the SEAL teams, and then put them in the categories. What are the grit attributes? What are the mental acuity attributes? What are the drive attributes? What are the ones that make up great leadership? And what are the ones that make up great team ability? And came up with 25.